Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from RAU'S IAS Study Circle. Now we are also available on Telegram, so join our Telegram channel by clicking on the link that is available in the description below to get the latest updates from RAU'S IAS Study Circle. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will discuss the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 15th April 2021, and the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. But before that, there is an announcement that the Quality Improvement Program for the Preliminary Examination of 2021 have started from Monday, that is today. And these include 50 hours of targeted course of the preliminary examination, and there will be a balance between the core and the current affairs section. And this will help you in having a targeted approach for this year's preliminary examination. The next batch will start from 3rd of May. For more details, look at the link that has been given in the description box below. With this, let's start the discussion now. Now, in our series of weekly discussion of questions from the mains examination perspective from the Daily News Simplified, we have taken up this question, and it reads, findings of the National Health Survey 5 shows acute malnutrition in India. In this context, suggest the measures to improve nutritional status in India among women and children, and you have to write the answer for this question in 150 words, and this is for 10 marks. So you can post your answers in the comment section on the ELEARN platform of RAU'S IAS, and the link for this question has been provided in the description box below. So do post your answers before Saturday to get them evaluated by the RAU'S IAS faculty team. Now this article on page number 1 reads that the state is obliged to facilitate access to education, and this has been said by Supreme Court in one of its judgment. Now the case here was that 2 students from Ladakh were nominated by the Union Territory Administration for allocation of seats in the Lady Hardinge and Maulana Azad medical colleges in Delhi. However, although they were allocated the seats, but they were not admitted in these 2 institutions. And accordingly, these students moved to the Supreme Court saying that their fundamental right to education was being curtailed because of not getting admission into these colleges despite being allocated seats by the Union Territory Administration. So on this case, the Supreme Court in its judgment has said that the right to pursue higher education or professional education has not been spelled out in the fundamental rights in the Part 3 of the Constitution, which means that the right to professional education or right to pursue higher education has not been explicitly mentioned in the fundamental rights under Part 3 of the Indian Constitution. However, it becomes obligatory on the states to facilitate the access to education because India is a member of International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Accordingly, in this discussion, we will look at this international covenant from our preliminary examination perspective and its various aspects. Now, this international covenant was signed as a treaty subsequent to the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. And if you look at this question that was asked in the prelims examination of 2020, it was related to the principles and the provisions of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and where they are reflected in the Indian Constitution besides the fundamental rights that have been provided in the Part 3 of the Indian Constitution. So this question reads, other than the fundamental rights, which of the following parts of the Constitution of India reflect or reflects the principles and provisions of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 1948? We all know that preamble, the DPSPs and the fundamental duties all reflect the human rights that have been mentioned in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and the correct answer was D, that is 1, 2 and 3. Now, although fundamental rights have been provided in the Indian Constitution, human rights have been recognized at the international level. And these human rights were recognized under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was adopted in the year 1948 post Second World War. And accordingly, if you look at the International Bill of Rights, there are 3 important conventions or treaties. First is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was adopted in 1948. It was a non-legally binding agreement. However, the subsequent 2 treaties, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, as well as the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, are both legally binding treaties that were signed subsequently to the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. And all these 3, that is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, form the International Bill of Human Rights, which is the pillar of human rights protection within the United Nations system. So these are the three pillars under the United Nations systems related to human rights protection. So this is an important aspect for us from the preliminary examination perspective. Now, regarding this International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, as we have already mentioned, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, which was a non-legally binding document, was adopted in the year 1948. And in 1966, two separate treaties which covered almost entirely all rights that were enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights were adopted after approximately 20 years of negotiations. Now, this covenant reflects the commitments that were adopted after the World War II to promote the social progress and better standards of life, and also reaffirming faith in the human rights and employing the international machinery to that end. Now, as this International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights is an international human rights treaty, it creates legally binding international obligations to those states that have agreed to be bound by the standards that are contained under this treaty. So clearly you should note that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a non-legally binding document. However, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights as well as the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights are both legally binding. Now, legally binding simply means that the states who have signed and have ratified this treaty are bound by the standards that are provided by this international covenant. And accordingly, a mechanism has also been formulated to overview the implementation of the international covenants related to economic, social and cultural rights as well as the civil and the political rights. Now, what are the rights that are contained under this International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights? Let us look at them. Now, some of the points that are highlighted on your screen related to the rights that have been mentioned under this covenant can be used in your essay writing as well as in the ethics paper. So simply the preamble of the covenant recognizes that economic, social and cultural rights derive from the inherent dignity of the human person. And the ideal of free human beings enjoying freedom of fear and want can only be achieved if the conditions are created whereby everyone may enjoy his economic, social, cultural rights as well as civil and political rights. So the International Covenant recognizes that the economic, social and cultural rights derive from the inherent dignity of the human person. And accordingly, there is a need for creating conditions whereby everyone can enjoy his or her economic, social and cultural rights as well as civil and political rights. And accordingly, it has outlined certain overarching principles under the covenant and has also recognized certain rights. Firstly, the two principles that are recognized by the International Covenant related to economic, social and cultural rights is that equality and non-discrimination in regards to the enjoyment of all the rights set forth in the treaty. And secondly, the state parties have an obligation to respect, protect and fulfill the economic, social and cultural rights. Now, what are these rights that have been recognized under the covenant? First is the right to work. Second is the right to just and favorable conditions of work, right to form and join trade unions and the right to strike, right to social security including social insurance, right to protection and assistance for family, prohibition of child labor, right to adequate standard of living for oneself and his family, right to the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health, right to education, the freedom of parents to choose schools other than those established by the public authorities, and right to take part in cultural life and to the benefit from social progress. So these are the rights that have been recognized by this covenant, and these are some of the points that can be used in your essay writing as well as in the ethics papers. Now, what happens when a country becomes a party to this international covenant? So when a country becomes the state party to this International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, it voluntarily accepts a range of legally binding obligations to promote the realization of these economic, social and cultural rights at the national level. And this particularly has been the argument of the Supreme Court in providing these two students relief for getting admission into the medical colleges in Delhi. Further, upon ratification and accession to this covenant, a state party is also offering itself to the scrutiny of an international committee of independent experts on the basis of these norms and standards. So once a country has ratified this covenant, there will be an international committee which will make sure that the country is following the norms and standards established by the covenant or not. And the committee is known as the Committee on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. It is the supervisory body of the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. and it was established under the United Nations Economic and Social Council, and which is famously known as the ECOSOC, and it carries out the monitoring functions that have been assigned by the ECOSOC. So it is basically a supervisory body which supervises the implementation of the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. So these are a few points related to the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, which can be important for us from preliminary examination point of view and can also be used in the essay and the ethics answer writing. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 7 is related to the issue of homosexuality and the LGBT community. And the points that we discuss here can be important for us from General Studies paper 2 point of view in the topics social issues and social justice. Now, we all know that Supreme Court had recently decriminalized homosexuality in India by repealing section 377 of the Indian Penal Code in 1860. Now, this section 377 stated that whoever voluntarily has carnal intercourse against the order of the nature with any man, woman or animal shall be punished. And this section included private consensual sex between adults of same sex. And the Supreme Court, in its famous verdict that is known as the Singh Johar case versus the Union of India in 2018, had decriminalized homosexuality by repealing the section 377 of the Indian Penal Code. Now, the key idea of author here is that all those people who were convicted under the section 377 of the Indian Penal Code, which criminalized homosexuality, should be provided pardon, and this can be termed as providing an ex post facto pardon. So the idea is that even though people were convicted under the section 377, the government of India should provide pardon to these people, and this will be a novel concept in India, and it would do justice even though delayed to the prisoners of sexual conscience. And to put forward his argument, the author provides the UK's Alan Turing law, which was passed in 2017. And this law grants amnesty and pardon to those who were convicted of consensual same-sex relationship. Now, this law is named after Alan Turing, who was the computer scientist who was instrumental in cracking the intercepted coded messaging during the World War II, and he was convicted of gross indecency in 1952. So in this regard, the author suggests that to make amends for the excesses that were committed against the LGBT community in the past and the present, the Indian state should also enact a RAU'S Act on the same lines of Alan Turing law, which was passed by UK in 2017. Now, Siraj was a professor and head of the Department of Modern Indian Languages at Aligarh Muslim University. And he was caught having consensual sex with another man, and as such he was suspended by AMU for gross misconduct. Now, even though Siraj won the case against the university in the Allahabad High Court and got his job back, Siraj died a mysterious death on April 7, 2010. And accordingly, the author argues that the ex post facto pardon should be provided to all those who were convicted under the section 377 of the Indian Penal Code. And accordingly, the Parliament should enact a RAU'S Act which would provide amnesty to all those who were convicted under this section. So let us look at the provisions of section 377 and also the landmark judgments related to the issue of criminalizing homosexuality and how it was decriminalized through various judgments of the Supreme Court and High Courts. So the section 377 of the Indian Penal Code 1860 stated that whoever voluntarily has carnal intercourse against the order of the nature with any man, women or animal shall be punished. And this included private consensual sex between adults of same sex. In this regard, the Nas Foundation versus Government of National Capital Territory of Delhi 2009 is very important. And the Delhi High Court had decriminalized homosexual acts involving consenting adults. In this regard, the court had held that the section 377 of the IPC offended the guarantee of equality that is enshrined in the Article 14 of the Indian Constitution. And this is because it creates an unreasonable classification and targets homosexuals as a class. And that is why it stands against the idea of equality that is provided in the Article 14. Further, the judgment said that discrimination is the antithesis of equality, and it is the recognition of equality which will foster dignity of every individual. However, Supreme Court in 2013 under the Suresh Kumar Kaushal case had overturned the previous judgment that was provided by Delhi High Court in 2009. And this judgment of Supreme Court in 2013 once again criminalized homosexuality. The Supreme Court argued that in 150 years, less than only 200 persons had been prosecuted under the Section 377, and therefore the plight of sexual minorities could not be used as an argument for deciding the constitutionality of this law. However, the Supreme Court ruled that it was for the legislature or the parliament to look into the desirability of deleting Section 377 of the IPC. However, after this, a landmark judgment was passed that was related to right to privacy as a fundamental right, and this was known as Justice K.S. Puttaswamy case versus the Union of India, and it was passed in 2017. Under this judgment, the Supreme Court ruled that the fundamental right to privacy is intrinsic to life, liberty, and thus it comes under the Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. And accordingly, in this judgment, the Supreme Court declared that bodily autonomy was an integral part of the right to privacy. And this bodily autonomy has within its ambit the sexual orientation of individual. And this judgment, which was related to right to privacy and which recognized the right to privacy as a fundamental right, opened the way for decriminalizing homosexuality. And accordingly, in year 2018, another landmark judgment was passed, and which was known as Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India case. And under this judgment, the Supreme Court dismissed the position that was taken by itself in the Suresh Kumar Kaushal case of 2013, that the LGBT community constitutes a minuscule minority, and so there was no need to decriminalize homosexual sex. So this was the understanding of the Supreme Court in the 2013 judgment. However, the 2018 Navtej Singh Johar judgment dismissed this position of the Supreme Court, which it had taken back in 2013. So these are various judgments of the Supreme Court which led to the understanding and decriminalizing of homosexuality in India. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 8 is related to India's stand on joining the RCEP. In this regard, India had withdrawn from the RCEP back in 2019. However, Singapore, which is a member of the ASEAN grouping, has called that India should review its stand on the RCEP Pact and should also think of joining the RCEP. So the Foreign Minister of Singapore has said that he hopes that India will reassess the regional trade pacts like the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, etc. Now, when India had withdrawn from the RCEP back in 2019, we had covered various aspects of the issues related to India not joining the RCEP and what were the key issues because of which India abstained from joining the RCEP at that point of time. So we will revise from that DNS video the reasons as to why India did not join the RCEP back then, and also what India needs to do before joining the RCEP. Let us revise from that video. And India has cited that if India joins the RCEP in its present format, it will hurt its farmers, businesses, workers, and consumers. So in this article, we will try and understand what is RCEP and which all countries have joined this RCEP or Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Further, what would happen if India joins this RCEP as to what will be the impact on its exports and imports? And further, what would be the impact on India if India remains out of this RCEP? The third aspect that we will look at is the India's concerns related to this RCEP. After that, we will try and look at why India wants to join the RCEP in the first place, or why was India interested in this RCEP deal. And finally, how the China factor plays in India joining this RCEP. And finally, we'll look at what India should do, or what are the areas which require India's attention before joining this RCEP deal. So now the present status is that the RCEP deal has been finalized. However, India has not joined this RCEP. However, as the news article reads, India can join RCEP at a later stage also, provided all the issues which have been raised by India are resolved. So first, let us look at the basics as to which all countries are the part of RCEP and what are the key important facts and figures related to this RCEP or the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. Now, originally RCEP was a proposed free trade agreement between 16 nations, and these free trade agreement was between 10 ASEAN members and its 6 free trade agreement partners. So the 10 ASEAN countries are the 10 Southeast Asian countries, and the 6 free trade agreement partners are China, Japan, India, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. However, as the trade deal has been finalized, India has withdrawn from this RCEP deal. However, all other 5 free trade partners and the 10 ASEAN countries have joined this RCEP. Now, if India was a part of this RCEP, it would have accounted for 25% of the world GDP, that is 1/4 of the world GDP. Secondly, it would have accounted for 30% of the world trade, 26% of the foreign direct investment flow, and 45% of world's population. Further, the combined trade of the RCEP members stands at about $2.7 trillion. So these figures show that this RCEP could have played a key role in the global economy. And with increasing integration, RCEP would have stood as one of the biggest and largest economic bloc in the world. However, now as India has withdrawn from this RCEP, the RCEP would account for only 1/3 of the global GDP. And further, without India, RCEP would account for only 1/3 of the world's population as against the proposed 45% of the world's population. So this shows that India would have been one of the important partners in this RCEP deal. However, India has chosen to remain out of this RCEP because of various concerns. So after this, let us look at what would have been the impact on India's trade if India joined this RCEP deal. Now, what is the present status of India's exports and imports with the existing countries which are participating in the RCEP? So if you look at the figures, the RCEP countries presently account for almost 27% of India's total trade. So this reflects that RCEP countries are important for India's trade relations. And that is why India wanted to join this RCEP deal. Secondly, exports to these RCEP countries account for about 21% of India's total exports. And as far as the imports are concerned, India imports from RCEP countries and these comprise about 34% of India's total imports. So these figures reflect that these countries which are part of the RCEP are important trading partners of India. However, the biggest concern that India has is that out of the 15 countries in the RCEPs, India has trade deficit with almost 11 countries. And this total trade deficit stands at about $105 billion. Now, out of this huge trade deficit, China accounts for about $53 billion of the trade deficit alone, which means that 50% of the trade deficit of India with the RCEP countries is with China. And that is why this is one of the biggest concern of India joining the RCEP deal, because it runs trade deficit with one of the important partners of RCEP, that is China. Now, there are certain products in which India has trade surplus. However, there are many more products in which India has a trade deficit. For example, India runs trade surplus in agriculture and allied products, textiles, gems and jewelries. However, India's concern is that if India joins this RCEP deal, these trade surpluses in the fields of agriculture, textiles, gems and jewelries could be wiped off. And that is mainly because India would be forced to reduce tariffs on the imports related to these products. Further, another concern that India has is that the products in which India has trade surplus account for only a small portion in the deficit with other commodities. So there are many more commodities in which India has a trade deficit, and it only has trade surplus in few products. And that is one of the biggest concern of India as far as joining the RCEP is concerned. Now, the items in which India has huge deficits is related to electrical machinery, iron and steel, electronics, etc. So these are the figures related to the exports and imports of India with the RCEP countries. And the biggest concern is that India has huge trade deficit with China in the RCEP. Now, diplomatically and economically, what would be the impact if India does not join the RCEP? Or what would be the impact on India if it does not join the RCEP? So it is said that diplomatically, India will stand losing a great opportunity to be a part of world's biggest trade bloc. And as China has already become a member of this RCEP, it will end up completely dominating the trade in this Southeast Asian and Pacific region. Further, we note that India wants to become an export-oriented economy. However, if India remains out of this RCEP deal, it would affect India's export ambitions. And thirdly, India stands to lose out on important opportunities like global supply chain management and high-end goods. So these are few impacts that are likely to occur if India does not join this RCEP in the near future. Now, why is India not joining this RCEP, or what are the concerns of India as far as the RCEP is concerned? So India has said that India wants these issues to be resolved first, and only after these issues are resolved, India will become a member of the RCEP. So after this, let us look at what are the various issues and what is India's stand and what is the stand of other RCEP members. Now, the first concern of India is related to the base year for tariffs. And in this, India has said that the base year should be 2019. And this is because India has raised tariffs between 2014 to 2019. However, majority of the countries in the RCEP have said that the base year for the calculation of tariffs should be 2013, and that is when the talks started for this RCEP. Now, for example, if on a product P, the tariff imposed by India was about 10% in the year 2014. And in the year 2019, this tariff has been raised to about 15%. So India wants that any change in the tariff should be based on this year. That is the base year, which should be 2019. So for example, all the countries agree to reduce tariff on this product. It should be reduced on the 2019 tariff, that is 15%. So for example, if the countries decide to reduce the tariffs by 2% on this product P, it should be on the 2019 tariff, that is 15%. So it will be reduced to only 13%. However, the other countries want that this reduction in the tariff should be on the base year 2014's tariffs, which means that the reduced tariff would now be only 8%. So in this line, India has said that the base year for the tariffs calculation should be year 2019. And why is it so? This is mainly because India has raised various tariffs between 2014 to 2019. So if any fall in tariff occurs, it would not impact India adversely. However, most of the countries which are participating in the RCEP have said that the base year for the tariffs calculation should be 2013, and that is exactly when the RCEP talks started. Now, second is related to the freedom to increase tariff or decrease tariff rates. So in this, India's stand is that there should be freedom to increase the tariff rates. So for example, if on a product P, the tariff is about 10%, India says that it should be free to increase or reduce the tariff. However, the other countries which are participating in RCEP have agreed that once the tariffs are reduced on one product P, it can never go up and it should only go down. So for example, if the tariff on product P is reduced from 10 to 8, it cannot again be made 9. However, it can further be reduced to 7. Third issue is related to the rules of origin of the products. Now, India wants that the rule of origin of products should strictly be from the country of import. However, other countries have agreed that the rules of origin of any product can be anywhere within the RCEP region. Now, what the rules of origin mean is that it means the country where the product which is being imported by India originates. Now, for example, if there is a product P, and if India is importing this product from China, it should also be produced in China only. Now, what is the concern here? So, you should understand that on this product P which India imports, if India has a tariff of 10% for China, and on the other hand, if India has a tariff of about 7% for import of the same product from Indonesia, what China would do is that it would route that product from Indonesia towards India. And that is how it can avoid being charged with higher tariffs for exports to India or on Indian imports. So India strictly wants that the rules of origin should be from the country of import. So whatever product India is importing from Indonesia should be originated in Indonesia only and should not be routed by any other country through Indonesia. So this was just an example. So India has said that the rules of origin should strictly be from the country of import only. However, other countries have said that such rules of import can be anywhere from within the RCEP region. Further, regarding the tariff lines, India has said that it should be possible for India to have country-specific negotiations regarding different tariffs on different products. However, other RCEP countries have agreed that there should be more or less uniform tariffs on all the participating countries. So India says that India should have possibility of negotiating different tariffs for different countries, or there should be country-specific negotiation on tariffs on different products. Now the next issue is related to the issue of data localization, and we have covered this issue of data localization in one of the previous DNS videos. Now in this regard, India wants that all the multinational companies which are operating in India should store the data of its citizens in India only, and it should not be stored in any other country. However, other RCEP countries have said that there should be free flow of data except for national security purposes, which means that there should be free flow of data of different people of different countries for economic purposes. Now the next issue is related to the safeguard mechanism. Now what is this safeguard mechanism? So here you should note that when there is exceptional surge in imports of some of products, the countries impose high duty on those products. Now the issue here is that India wants an auto trigger mechanism in case of import surge. So if India sees that there is increased surge in imports of some products, it should be able to impose these safeguard duties. However, the RCEP countries are saying that such safeguard duties should only be imposed in exceptional cases and there should not be any auto trigger mechanism, which means that such safeguard duties should be imposed only after negotiation with the other countries. So these are few issues between India and other RCEP countries, and these are mainly related to the base year, the ratchet clause, rules of origin, tariff lines, data localization and safeguard mechanisms. Now after this, let us look at, despite all the issues and concerns which have been raised by India, why is India tempted to join RCEP? Now we note that India has trade deficits with various RCEP countries. However, India sees this as an opportunity, and that is mainly because of its service sector. And if you look at the trade balance in the service sector, India has had a surplus in the service sector in the past 3 to 4 years. However, it has had trade deficit in the merchandise products. Now we note that India's merchandise trade has been in deficit since 1977, and in the last decade this has stood at about $1.4 trillion. So in this background, as India's service sector is its strength, India wants that if it becomes part of RCEP and by increasing the service sector exports, India can benefit and reduce this trade deficit in merchandise and other products. And further, trade and services are in surplus and they are growing at a strong rate. And that is why RCEP could provide a boost to India's service exports. Now, although India is tempted to join this RCEP, let us look at how India's previous trade deals have fared. Now, it is said that India's track record has not been very good when it comes to free trade agreements. And this is reflected in the utilization rates of free trade agreements by India. And this stands at about 25%. So what all benefits were likely to arise out of these free trade agreements previously did not arise in case of India. And India could only make use and benefit of about 25% of the clauses of the existing free trade agreements. Further, India has had a free trade agreement with the ASEAN countries. However, the merchandise trade deficit has widened to about $14.6 billion presently. Further, the import duties foregone during the last 3 years are about $10.3 billion. Now, what import duties foregone means is that if India did not come into any free trade agreement, what would have been India's earnings from these import duties? Further, India has had a free trade agreement with South American trade bloc, that is Mercosur. And with that trade bloc also, India runs a trade deficit. And finally, India also runs a trade deficit with African countries. Now, all this data shows that India has not benefited much from these free trade agreements previously. Now, after this, let us look at the China factor in India's withdrawal from the RCEP. Now, we know that India is running a trade deficit with China, and China accounts for over 50% of India's trade deficit. Now, what trade deficit means is that India is importing more from China and is exporting less to the China. And which can be seen in this graph, which shows data of imports and exports from the year 2010 till the year 2018 and 19. Now, these figures show that the rate of growth of exports has not been very good in case of India's exports to China. However, the imports from China have increased till the year 2017 and 18, and they have only witnessed a dip in the year 2018 to 19. Further, India's trade deficit with China has risen 13-fold in the past decade. And what India exports to China are mainly primary products, which means that it only includes ores, minerals, and cotton. However, India imports manufactured products from China, which means that India is importing high value products from China while it is exporting low value products to the China. And this is one of the reasons for trade deficit with China. Now, India's biggest concern is that in the background of this existing high trade deficit with China, if India joins RCEP and the tariffs on various products are lowered, then China will dump India's markets with cheap exports and cheap products. And that is likely to worsen the trade deficit that exists between India and China, which is already very high, and it stands at about 50% of India's total trade deficit with all other countries. Now, what all areas should be focused by India before joining and deciding to join this RCEP deal? So first is that India should enhance its exports. Now, as we have learned that India already runs trade deficits with 11 of the members of the RCEP. So this shows that this figure of trade deficit can only be reduced if India works on its exports. Secondly, India should also work on building the manufacturing capabilities, and that is mainly because India has lagged behind in the manufacturing sector. And that is one of the reasons why China is flooding Indian markets with manufactured products. Third is that India should also focus on making high value goods at a competitive price. And we know that the major articles of exports from India are primary products, and they are not high value manufactured or finished products. And a corollary of this is that India should also focus on innovation and research. And India should capitalize on its existing advantages in the service sector, because we know that the service sector exports have increased. And that is why India should further leverage on this capability and advantage which it is already having in the service sector. So in this article, we have understood what is RCEP and what was the economic importance of RCEP for the global economy. After this, we looked at the trade deficit of India with various RCEP countries and what would have happened to India's exports and imports if India chose to join this RCEP. Further, what are the likely economic and diplomatic impacts if India does not join this RCEP? And after that, we have looked at various concerns which have been raised by India regarding the various clauses of the RCEP deal. After that, we looked at as to why India was tempted to join the RCEP and how have the previous free trade agreements of India with various other trade blocs and countries fared in the past. After that, we looked at the China factor in India withdrawing from the RCEP. And finally, what all areas need to be focused before India joins RCEP. Now, after this discussion, you can try and answer this question from your mains examination point of view. And with this, let's take up the next article. Now, this article on page number 8 highlights that India and Russia both are committed to this S-400 deal. Now, this S-400 deal has continuously been in news for past 1 to 2 years, and it has been covered extensively various times. So let us revise the key aspects of the S-400 missile defense system and how a question can be asked in your preliminary examination. Now, first thing that you need to learn about the S-400 Triumph long-range air defense system is that it has been built by or developed by Russia. And it is the most advanced long-range surface-to-air missile defense system. Now, why is it most advanced? So, it is advanced because it is a layered defense system and it can intercept all types of aerial targets, and these include the aircrafts, unmanned aerial vehicles, ballistic and cruise missiles up to a range of 400 kilometers and at an altitude of up to 30 kilometers. And this is what makes the S-400 missile defense system important for India. Further, it can track 100 airborne targets, and this can include the super fighters such as the American-built F-35 and engage 6 of them simultaneously. Now, this S-400 defense system has already been deployed in Syria in 2015 to guard Russian and Syrian naval and air assets. Further, Russia has also stationed S-400 units in the Crimean Peninsula, which it had conquered recently. And the present situation is that India has already signed a deal back in 2018 with Russia for procurement of such air defense system. However, Turkey, which has procured this system from Russia, is facing sanctions from the United States of America under its CAATSA law, which is known as Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. Now, this CAATSA Act has been discussed in detail in the Daily News Simplified of 16 December 2020 by Basavasar. So do go through the important aspects of the CAATSA Act, which can be important for us from preliminary as well as mains examination point of view. Now, we have been publishing videos related to the prelims test series regularly. And in the current affairs of July month back in 2019, we had discussed a question related to the S-400 missile defense system. And that system was designed based on the previous year questions that have been asked by the UPSC. So let us revise from that video the question related to the S-400 defense system and how it becomes important because of the previous year questions that have already been asked from this topic. So let us look at that. Now, the third question is based on the question that was asked in the prelims of 2018. And in the year 2018, the question read, what is terminal high altitude area defense, that is THAAD, sometimes seen in the news? Now, regarding THAAD system, it should be noted that it was in news in that year because the United States of America had deployed this anti-missile system in the Korean Peninsula because of increasing tensions between North Korea and South Korea. And here the correct answer was C, that is, it is an American anti-missile system. Now, if you look at the options that were given by the UPSC in this question, the first is that it is an Israeli radar system. Second is that it is India's indigenous anti-missile program. And the fourth option is that it is a defense collaboration between Japan and South Korea. Now, anti-missile programs are generally in news, and hence the option was designed as it might be an India's indigenous anti-missile program. Further, the Israel-Palestine conflict is almost in news every year, and that is why this option was also designed. And this question has been designed based on the S-400 Triumph, sometimes seen in the news. So the options are that it is an indigenous missile defense system developed by the Defense Research Development Organization. Second is that it is the anti-satellite system recently tested by India. Third is that it is a defense collaboration between United States of America and India. And the fourth option is that it is an advanced long-range air defense missile system developed by Russia. Now, most of the options that have been designed in this question are based on the recent happenings only. For example, the first option is that it is an indigenous missile defense system, and this has been designed because India is trying to acquire a missile defense system. However, it is not an indigenous missile defense system. Now, the second option is that it is the anti-satellite system recently tested by India. And we know that recently India had tested the anti-satellite system under its Mission Shakti. Now, although this statement is correct in itself, however, it is wrong in the context of the question, and hence the option B and A are incorrect. Further, various defense agreements between India and the United States of America have also been in news in this year. However, they are not related to this term S-400 Triumph, and hence the C option is also correct. So the correct answer here is that it is an advanced long-range air defense missile system which has been developed by Russia. And in this context, India is trying to acquire this missile defense system which has been developed by the Russia. However, this move of India has been opposed by the United States of America. And the US has cautioned India that the S-400 deal could attract sanctions under the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act or the CAATSA Act. And this act of America restricts any defense purchases by any country from Russia, Iran, or North Korea. And that is why this S-400 Triumph missile system, which India was trying to acquire from Russia, was in news because the United States of America had cautioned that India will face sanctions if this defense deal goes through. So while answering such questions, you should be careful that you do not fall for other options which seem correct in the first place, however, are not related to the actual requirement of the question. Now, this article on page number 13 talks about the NATO or the North Atlantic Treaty Organization countries exiting Afghanistan along with the United States of America. And this is basically related to the war that is going on in Afghanistan post 2001. So in this, let us look at the key aspects related to the North Atlantic Treaty Organization from our preliminary examination perspective. Now, regarding NATO, you should note that it originated after World War II in order to counter the expansion of Soviet Union into the Western Europe. So this was basically a part of the Cold War strategy of the Western world to counter the erstwhile USSR. Now, in order to counter the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the USSR had formulated a pact which was known as Warsaw Pact. And both the NATO and the Warsaw Pact were military alliances that were created during the period of Cold War. However, this Warsaw Pact got dissolved after the USSR was disintegrated in 1990s. And accordingly, only the North Atlantic Treaty Organization remains till date, which was created after the Second World War in the Cold War era. Accordingly, NATO is a military alliance of countries from Europe and North America, and it provides a link between the Western countries of the two continents, that is the North American and the European continent. And you can see that it involves countries that border the Atlantic Ocean in this map. Further, NATO's membership is open to any other European country which adheres to the principle of NATO, and it aims at contributing to the security of North Atlantic area. In this regard, the NATO has incorporated various countries, and presently its membership stands at 30 countries. And some of the erstwhile countries that were associated with USSR in the Warsaw Pact have now joined the NATO. Further, decisions at the NATO are taken by consensus. Now, the core tasks of NATO include collective defense, crisis management, and cooperative security. And the principle of collective defense, under which an attack against one or several of the NATO members is considered as an attack against all. So this is the most important principle of NATO, which makes it a very important military alliance. And this was basically the Cold War strategy that was adopted by the Western world against the influence or the rising influence of the erstwhile USSR. So basically, if any attack happens against a NATO member, it will be considered as an attack against all the members of the NATO. Now, this principle till now has only been invoked once, and this was invoked in response to the 9/11 terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center in the United States of America in 2001. So this becomes an important fact that the article related to collective defense has only been invoked once since the creation of NATO. And the principle of collective defense has been provided in the important article of the NATO organization that is known as Article 5. So this is again an important fact. Now the member countries of the NATO organization can also be asked in your preliminary examination. In this regard, as you can see, it involves the countries or the transatlantic countries which are located across the Atlantic Ocean, as can be seen in this world map. And it includes countries like Canada and United States of America from the North America, and United Kingdom, Portugal, Spain, France, Germany, Italy, and various other countries in the European continent across the Atlantic Ocean. So keep them in mind. You can be asked a question in the preliminary examination related to NATO, and you might be knowing that previously also UPSC has asked very simple questions based on international organizations. So accordingly, this can also be an important aspect. With this, let's take up the next news article now. And this editorial on page number 6 talks about the issue of inflation that the Indian economy is witnessing. And we have already discussed about the stagflation that is being witnessed by Indian economy in the DNS of 13th April 2021. So do go through this video and try to understand the retail inflation from the economy perspective. Then again, this article has appeared on page number 7, and it is related to the US-India issue, and it is related to the basics of the UNCLOS or the United Nations Convention on Law of Seas. And this has also been discussed extensively in the DNS of 10th April 2021. Do go through this. So with this, we conclude today's discussion, and this is the question for the day.